On a hot Tuesday evening 4 years ago, I leant over the ropes of a boxing ring to watch two men sparring. Something wasn't right. Having coached both these guys for years, I knew them well. And while neither was Mike Tyson, normally their rounds were full of classy angles and quick reactions. But on this day, they looked sloppy and out of sync. Their footwork was messy, they failed to defend, and they looked out of breath after just a few minutes of work. My first instinct was to shout out practical advice. I told them to plant their feet, to use their jabs and slow down. But like their damn punches, these tips failed to land because the problem wasn't technical. They were distracted rather than incapable. The issue was that they weren't present. By the way, my name's Hazel Gale. I'm a former athlete turned therapist, author, and now creator of the Betwixt app, and this video is about how to get into flow. I competed as a fighter for just shy of a decade, and I coached for almost 20 years. And one of the most frequent conversations I had during that time was about how to get into the zone. But this isn't a topic reserved only for athletes. The flow state is available and very beneficial during pretty much any activity that we do repeatedly, from washing the dishes to writing an epic novel. You'll know it as the effortless, automatic state you sometimes just slip into, where everything just seems to work perfectly. It's that frame of mind where we're totally focused but without focusing. Your mind locked onto the task without the distraction of random thoughts or worries. You may know flow as a fleeting experience lasting only seconds at a time, or you may have been in flow for hours. Either way, you are capable of it, and you can have more of it with just a little work. The conditions for flow are these. 1. That the challenge faced is great enough to consume your attention, and 2. That the perceived threat is small enough to avoid emotional hijacking or panic. In other words, flow sits in that sweet spot where things are neither too easy or too hard. Rule-bound activities create the perfect opportunity for flow. This means that the zone awaits in pretty much any profession, sport, or hobby. But when the pressure is on, this optimal state can be elusive. It takes training to learn how to summon it up and self-awareness to know when we need to. My own battle to overcome this particular challenge was what inspired me to train as a therapist back in 2010. Since then, I've worked with countless athletes and non-sports people alike to find answers to the question of how to get into flow when the going gets tough. Here, I'd like to share with you one of the simplest and most effective solutions that I've come across. Let's stick with competitive fighting as an example. While competing, a boxer can get sidetracked by any number of different things. The cheering or jeering of the crowd, fatigue, physical pain, the prospect of failure, the glory of the win, whatever. But it's not those things that actually do the distracting. It's the thoughts we have about those things that cause the problems. Thinking really gets in the way when we need to perform. It's too slow for a start. By the time the fighter has had a chance to have a little wonder about how they might block the next jab, it'll have landed at least once. Even in situations where speed is not of the essence, thinking sabotages our focus by drawing our attention inside. It prevents us from being focused and present, connected to our environment. Instead, we get caught up in the distracting mental chatter that causes self-consciousness and anxiety. Useless. Now, when a boxer gets stuck in their head, they tend to display one of two ineffective symptoms. The first is sluggishness. They slow down, freeze, feel heavy and hesitant, and they fail to react to the attacks of their opponent. The second is flightiness, like the opposite. They look panicked and they lose balance, as if their center of gravity has moved upwards in their body. In this mode, they may throw many punches but land few, and their energy will be short-lived. If they get caught by a good shot, they're more likely to get knocked down, and the boxing gets messy. And again, these symptoms are not sports-specific. Picture an anxious interviewee in front of a panel of prospective employers. What do you see? If you imagine them clamming up and going silent, you're visualizing the interview version of sluggishness, basically the bunny in the headlights reaction. If you imagine them babbling a rapid stream of nonsense, which is exactly what I do, then you're envisaging the interview version of flightiness. Panic and chaos take over. As I watched the sparring that summer evening, I could see that one of the fighters had grown sluggish while the other was flighty. This meant that boxer number 1 was behaving a bit like a punch bag. Boxer number 2, on the other hand, was throwing elaborate combinations but to little effect. They had abandoned the sweet science in favour of scrappy swinging. It was not a comfortable watch. But regardless of the boxers' contrasting reactions, the solution to each of their problems was the same. They needed to get out of their heads and into the game. Now, I may have been working as a therapist at this time, but in the boxing gym I had neither the permission nor the inclination to start asking people about what was worrying them. Thankfully, I didn't need to. To combat this distraction problem, I started teaching boxers a mindfulness technique. I like to call it 9 things, and it involves a series of simple requests. You can try it out now. I'm going to give you a little time between each step, but feel free to pause the video if you really want to get into it deeply. Step 1. Without moving your head. Notice 3 things that you can see. Just notice them. For example, I notice my phone, a picture on the wall, and the flowers on the table. Step 2. Notice 3 things that you can hear. Traffic or birdsong outside, the sound of your breathing perhaps. Find 3 different sounds. Step 3. Notice 3 things that you can feel in contact with your body. The brush of fabric against your skin, the temperature of the air, the ground beneath your feet. And step 4. Breathe slowly and calmly and go to relaxed peripheral vision so you're not looking at any specific thing but rather taking in the whole scene around you. And then calmly notice all 9 things at once. Now, if you try to do this well, you won't achieve it. So let go of tallying things up or trying to keep track. Don't try to focus or get any level of detail. Just be openly, gently aware of those 9 things all at once. Take a moment. Now, if that felt stressful, you're not alone. And this probably means that you were trying too hard. For now, take a breath and relax. If you practice this technique a few more times, you'll find that sweet spot, I'm sure of it. If, however, that felt really nice, you're probably nailing it. And you can stay in that state as I finish the story. On the day of the scrappy sparring, I led the boxers through this process as they stood in fighting stance facing one another in the middle of the ring. The first 3 requests took about 20 seconds. For the final step, I gave them another 10 seconds to settle into that state of relaxed awareness that I wanted them to adopt. Then afterwards, I instructed them to keep hold of that state as they resumed their sparring. As all of that was going on, the energy in the ring changed. It felt at once calmer and more energized, as if something really awesome was about to happen. When the sparring began, it was like I was watching 2 completely different athletes. Suddenly their movements looked considered and controlled. Their shots started to land flush, or if they didn't, it was because they were skillfully blocked. The boxers now seemed connected to both the action and the floor beneath them. And as a result, their performance had become solid, powerful, and effective. They were back in the game. So how does this work? First, focusing on our senses forces us into the present. If we're paying attention to what's happening in our immediate environment, then we are not paying attention to anxiety, rumination, pain, fatigue, or any other internal distraction. Second, the calm breathing and peripheral vision at step 4 encourages a state of calm. When we're in a state of psychological rest naturally, we will automatically breathe a little slower and unfocus our eyes. This means that if we consciously choose to do those 2 things when we're in a situation that would otherwise be a little nervous-making, we can trick our minds into thinking that the threat is minimal. This is within reason, of course. You can't just go into peripheral vision in front of a hungry crocodile and suddenly feel like you're on the beach in the Bahamas, which is a good thing. But it can help you to feel a little bit more relaxed in front of, say, an audience. And finally, the challenge to keep noticing all 9 things at once consumes our conscious awareness. It is hard to concentrate on that many things simultaneously. When you tried the technique earlier on, you might have found that you rotated through the different stimuli rather than holding them all in your mind concurrently. That's fine. The attempt to stay aware of all 9 is enough to keep your conscious mind busy and therefore to interrupt any distracting patterns of thought. Another variation on this process, the 5-4-3-2-1 technique, asks you to notice stimuli from all 5 senses. Count 5 things that you can see, 4 things that you can touch, 3 things you can hear, 2 you can smell, and 1 you can taste, even if that's just the inside of your own mouth. This is an equally effective way to short-circuit anxiety and step into the present moment. I didn't use that version for boxers because smell and taste are irrelevant to sparring. Sight, sound and touch, on the other hand, are crucial. And by repeating the exercise, the athletes can teach themselves to focus on the information required for them to box at their best. In other words, they can train their minds as they train their bodies to flow. So where might you be able to use this? Any battle can be won or lost in thought before it even begins. And I don't know what your equivalent to a round of sparring might be, but I'm sure you have one. To work it out, ask yourself where in your life distraction or self-consciousness can get in the way. Then wonder how those situations might be different if you could quickly get out of your head. To finish this off, I really need to point out that this tool isn't only for difficult situations. You can use this while you're taking a walk along the beach, watching the sunset, or just making a cup of tea. After all, we don't need to be in a state of discomfort to enjoy a bit of peaceful clarity and present moment awareness. So I highly recommend you give this a try, and I really hope it helps. You can hit follow for more, and if you'd like to take an epic journey through a magical world in pursuit of mental wellness, then you can download Betwixt, the mental health game, a fantasy text-based adventure app that combats stress and anxiety.